The following is informative and contains my opinion and understanding of the subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
Can psychopaths be nice? Well, when we think of psychopathy, we typically think of someone who is very manipulative and selfish and only thinks about themselves and their own needs. But did you know that some people who are considered psychopaths or have psychopathic tendencies are actually quite generous and kind? In this video, we are going to take a look at what the research says about whether psychopaths can be prosocial, and we'll also look at some real-life examples. Now, it is important to note that the term psychopath refers to people who display a combination of behavioral traits, such as antisocial behavior, callousness, and low levels of empathy and interpersonal emotions. It is not a diagnosis per se, but rather a term used to describe someone who may have psychopathic tendencies. There is no such thing as an empathetic psychopath, but there are people who possess psychopathic traits who could be quite nice. So just keep that in mind as we go through this video. With that said, let's get into it.
According to the research, psychopathy is associated with 3 broad personality characteristics, including low levels of empathy and interpersonal connections, interpersonal and social deviance, and a tendency towards negative emotions and behaviors.
Psychopaths don't experience emotions like guilt or shame the way that most people do, which allows them to do things that most people would never even consider doing. However, this lack of emotions doesn't mean that psychopaths are always mean or cruel. Sometimes being able to detach from one's emotions can actually be quite helpful. For example, in a study published in the Journal of Personality Disorders, researchers found that psychopathic men were more likely than non-psychopathic men to help a stranger in need if it meant that they would receive money afterwards. This might sound a bit odd. The researchers hypothesized that the psychopathic men were able to detach from the emotional aspects of the situation, allowing them to see helping the stranger as simply an opportunity to earn money. This detachment also allowed them to not be bothered by the stranger's desperate pleas for help, which may have bothered a non-psychopathic man.
In another study, psychopathic men were more likely than non-psychopathic men to donate blood if they were offered money afterwards. Again, this might sound odd, but the researchers argued that psychopathic men are able to detach from the fear of pain and the emotional aspects of donating blood, allowing them to focus on the monetary reward. So in these situations, psychopaths can actually be quite helpful and generous, even though they don't experience emotions the same way that other people do.
While the exact number of traits that need to be present for an antisocial or psychopathic diagnosis varies between researchers, most agree. There are at least 15 to 20 such traits, including features like low levels of empathy and interpersonal emotions, as well as high levels of impulsivity and sensation seeking. Psychopaths can be charming, which allows them to manipulate other people into doing what they want.
Some argue psychopathy is synonymous with serial killers, but only one of the population meets the criteria, and only a fraction of that become violent offenders. In fact, some psychopaths can even be considered prosocial. Prosocial behavior is any behavior that benefits another person or society. It may seem obvious that a psychopath would not be capable of behaving this way due to their lack of empathy, but it's not as straightforward as it seems.
According to a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2014, psychopaths can sometimes behave in prosocial ways, but these behaviors are self-serving rather than altruistic. So what does that mean?
When faced with certain circumstances, some psychopaths will behave in ways that benefit others, but they do so because they know that helping someone will ultimately help them in the long run.
Psychopaths tend to be highly skilled at reading social situations and understanding how other people think and behave. Do they know that being helpful will make them appear trustworthy and likable? Yes. And it allows them to form relationships that can be mutually beneficial. A famous example of antisocial personality or psychopathy in an individual who exhibited prosocial behavior is Ted Bundy. While he was undeniably a monster who brutally murdered at least women in the 1970s, he was also incredibly charming and charismatic. He used his good looks and charisma to gain the trust of his victims' families and friends,
which allowed him to manipulate them into doing what he wanted. Bundy was able to evade the police for many years because he was so good at getting people to like him. He was also highly intelligent and had a photographic memory, which helped him to plan and execute his crimes. Bundy was eventually caught and executed, but his case remains one of the most famous and infamous in criminal history.
As far as famous serial killer examples go, there's no shortage of them.
There's the case of Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, who terrorized Los Angeles in the 1980s.
Or John Wayne Gacy, who was convicted of murdering at least 33 young men and boys.
And then there's Jeffrey Dahmer, who was known for his horrific crimes and for keeping parts of his victims' bodies as souvenirs.
What is interesting about these cases and others like them is that it was not until the men were caught and their true nature revealed that their friends and family realized that they had been living with a monster all along. Before their arrests, they were seemingly normal members of society who held down jobs, had relationships, and were involved in community activities.
They seemed like upstanding citizens who would never hurt a fly, but behind closed doors, they were monsters who did horrible things to other people. It's hard to imagine how anyone could be both a seemingly nice person and a brutal murderer. But it's important to remember that psychopathy isn't a diagnosis, but rather a term used to describe a set of behavioral traits. People who are considered psychopathic can still lead normal lives and hold down jobs and relationships.
They may even appear to be good members of society. However, if certain situations arise that challenge their moral and ethical boundaries, they may exhibit the darker side of their personality.
While it may be tempting to think of psychopaths as always being evil masterminds or violent criminals, the truth is that they can be anyone.
Psychopaths can be found in all walks of life, and they can be difficult to identify because they often appear normal on the surface. If you have any questions, please put it in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.